Alright, hey everybody. Today we're going to take a look at finger and partial hand prosthetics, looking into the necessary components to make it best suited for its customers and what advancements they've made so far. This article was written by Erasmo Defonso, Giovanni Zappatore, Giacomo Mantriota, and Giulia Rina, and was published October 1st, 2020. According to the article, approximately 70% of the upper extremity amputations refer to partial hand loss with the involvement of one or more fingers. In the last few years, there have been large leaps in the technology and functional design of these mechanisms. When developing a prosthetic finger or partial hand, there first must be close anatomical study of the patient's counterpart appendage. This is necessary to allow for the most natural fit and a full recovery for the patient. Existing research on these prosthetic devices has categorized them into three subtypes: 1 degree of freedom, 2 degree of freedoms, and multi-degree of freedoms. Each of these device categories meet different needs, and each of them have their pros and cons. Throughout this presentation, we will cover characteristics needed of the prosthetics, and then the pros and cons of each of the different degrees of prosthetics. Characteristics. In this article, the writers focus on the problems and requirements of customers. These characteristics include functionality, grasp, and physicality. It's extremely important for the customer's needs to be met, otherwise it can lead to inefficiency, unnatural feel, and mental health problems. First, we will dive into functional characteristics. Amputation of a part of the hand may involve functional limitations for the amputee that are not easy to recover by orthosis or prosthetic. During manual activities, fingers are typically used to push, pull, and manipulate objects. Prosthetic must have the same anatomical structure of that of the corresponding hand. That means that if I were to lose a pinky on the left hand, it must match the pinky on the left hand, and so on. It must be able to perform the functions that the numerous muscles, ligaments, and tendons, and sheaths of the hand are able to perform as well. Next is grasp characteristics. Grasp characteristics that are taken into consideration when making a partial hand or finger prosthetic include natural motion, which the prosthetic must emulate the closure as much as possible than an anthropomorphic hand. This ability is referred to as pre-shaping of the finger when contacting with an object. The next one is shape adaptivity. The stability of each of the grasp pattern greatly depends on this characteristic that is often obtained with an under-actuated mechanism. We have pinching motion. The distal phalanx remains straight or rotates in counterclockwise direction, so the fingertips of index and thumb are in front of each other. It results in an efficient grasp for thin objects such as keys or papers. We also need stability, which means the objects need to be grasped and manipulated safely. Force isotropy. Grasping should be fulfilled with the uniform distribution of forces. We have workspace. It depends on the number and length of the phalanges, which is with which the prosthetic finger is modeled. We have stiffness, which is the relationship between actuation torque and the phalanx movement. We have bond and adjustment for body power devices, which mean the residual finger must be wrapped effectively by the prosthetic and be able to drive the prosthetic finger as a natural extension. And then we have accuracy in the required tasks, as well as time of extension and bend motion. Lastly, we have physical characteristics, which include weight, the lighter the better. Number of phalanges results from a trade-off between the increase in the number of components making up the prosthetic, improvement of the setting performance, and the increase in complexity. We have compactness, which is defined as the ratio between the width and length of a finger. We have design flexibility. It is recommended that versatility due to the uniqueness of the finger. Biocompatible materials that avoid irritation due to prolonged use. Appearance of the amputation of the upper extremities involves a large change in the external appearance that can lead to psychological problems in the acceptance of the patient's condition. Manufacturing process, which includes prosthetic being made with the best values of above parameters, the most competitive cost considering various production processes, and then noisiness. The purpose of all prosthetic is to provide the functional result without attracting undue attention to the user. Now that we've covered what is needed by a prosthetic, let's go over what kind of prosthetics are offered at this moment. Finger and partial hand prosthetics are classified into three categories as said before. 1 degree of freedom, 2 degrees of freedom, and multi-degrees of freedom. In the following slides, I'll touch on some of the prosthetics mentioned within the article. Most of the existing prosthetic fingers belong to this category. They typically rely on a single or cascades of 4-bar linkages, and consequently, one general drawback is that the movement of the whole finger stops if one of the phalanxes meet the surface of an object. Basically speaking, the one-DOF mechanisms are hardly shape adaptive. Through the examples that I've seen in this article, I'll be going over the Yang Jin Koi model, the two-coupled FBL, and the Akhtar model. The first considered solution was developed by Yang Jin Choi and used a 4-bar linkage. It takes advantage of natural finger movements next to it. The proximal ring serves as an anchoring point to the stump, while the middle ring drives the cross 4-bar linkage. The advantage to this design is that it's a basic design and allows for natural movement from the customer. However, its motion is completely dependent on all of the other finger movements. A slightly more complex embodiment, as shown here, features 3 phalanges, 20 links, and 28 joints. This mechanism completely mimics the patient's natural movement, but is also incredibly complex. The last of the one DOF we are looking at is one introduced by a man named Akhtar and uses the 3-bar system. Reduction of the mechanical hysteresis, greater compactness, and weight reduction is obtained by using a single body. This innovative PIP joint achieves, beside the above-mentioned advantages, less energy dissipation by friction in the hinges, better ease in manufacturing process of a single pieces, and no need for lubrication. A mechanism is referred to as under-actuated if it uses fewer actuators than the actual number of DOFs. The traditional actuators are replaced in these cases by passive elements such as springs or mechanical limits. These springs can be controlled but have small size and high simplicity. Of the 2 DOF examples that the article had given, I'm going over the Southampton model, the G. Puchamer model, and then the Sarah prototype. In the Southampton finger, under actuation is implemented only for the second phalanx through a wiffle tree mechanism. The body has 3 components, 5 links, and 9 joints. The fingers of the Southampton hand have been linked via the wiffle tree equalizing mechanism too. Another plus to this design is the light and compact design. However, there isn't a natural uncurling motion. Next, we have one developed by G. Puchamer. This prosthetic finger is composed of 3 phalanges and actuated by 1 motor. Inside the proximal member of the prosthetic, there is a motor which, through gears and transmission clutch, drive the spindle nut mounted on the recirculating ball spindle. This prosthetic provides accurate motion but is bulky and relies heavily on the spring property. And then we have the Sarah prototype. Embodiment of only 2 phalanges with a single 4-bar has been proposed in the Sarah prototype, which stands for Self-Adapting Robotic Auxiliary Hand. It has 2 DOFs and only 1 actuator indicated by the circular arrow. Thus, a spring is installed and keeps the finger stretched until the first phalanx does not come into contact with an object. At that moment, the spring is extended, allowing the relative rotation of the 2 phalanges. Again, this mechanism relies heavily on the spring property, but it is a very light and basic design that's user-friendly. Now we have the multi-DOF prosthetics. Some of the prototypes in this category are obtained simply by adding other elements to the 2DOF mechanisms described in the previous slides and are oftentimes a bit more complex. We're going to go over a micromotor design, a Kumha, and the switch block design. This prototype has 3 phalanges, 3 DOFs, 2 underactuated 4-bar linkage implemented, and 15 joint elements. It is a design oriented to develop a precision grip, and it is very shape adaptive. The mechanism is based on that of Sarah, the mechanism that we just went over in the last slide. Activation of the micromotor causes the distal phalanx pin to slide along the slot from point C to point B. So from here to here. And correspondingly, a counterclockwise rotation of both the proximal and intermediate phalanges. It performs precision and power grip, but it is very bulky and complex. The Kamha, which stands for Casino Underactuated Multi-Finger Hand, has 3 phalanges, 3 DOFs, 2 underactuated 4-bar linkages, coupled with a slider crank mechanism. The model results in 7 elements and no natural movement before contact. It is also based on the prototype Sarah, and it differs from the latter exclusively for the connecting rod crank system. This system is very adaptive and innovative, however it is again an extremely bulky design. And lastly, we have the switch block. Finally, this last mechanism describes an underactuated human-like finger capable of multi-mode underactuated grasping function. The switch element in the telescopic link between one mode and the other. If component 24 is locked, the rotation of the large level gear 7 causes the near knuckle, the middle knuckle, and far knuckle to rotate as a whole entity. When an object hampers the motion, the underactuation mechanism is enabled by passive elements that are the torsional springs and on the rotation hinges, which are these 3 black circles here. If the locking mechanism is activated, the motion of the finger resembles an anthropomorphic rotation and facilitates the wrapping of the envelope of the object. This sophisticated device provides accurate motion and natural motion if the switch element is activated. However, when it is locked, there is no natural movement or shape adaptivity. As highlighted through this paper, the hand is a very important limb for the human being. Its ability and dexterity that allow the individual to carry out most of the daily activities severely penalize those who have amputations. The refusal to use some of the prosthetic already available in the market derives from the failure to align the customer's needs, such as functionality, aesthetic recovery, weight, and cost. In general, increasing the degrees of freedom usually leads to fingers that are shape adaptive, but also leads to an absence of natural movement. Obviously, there is yet to be a perfect model crafted, and although there is still plenty of research and development needed to be made, this is a solid starting point for advanced development of the next generation of prosthetics. Thank you.